At the local hospital, Shin is napping in a staff's lounge since he pulled off an all-nighter while the other staff keep trying to wake him because his phone is ringing. One of them reads the caller ID out loud, saying it is Mizuho. Shin's eyes snap open. He immediately grabs the phone and answers, apologizing for not picking up right away. The people in the room watch as he makes casual small talk with Mizuho before ending the call. The male staff members tease him, asking if that is his rumored childhood friend. Shin becomes slightly defensive about the truth of their relationship as they continue joking about Mizuho. Later, Shin meets Mizuho, who playfully calls him by his profession. He looks at her with a bored expression, asking her to just be normal and call him Shin again. Mizuho offers him a lunchbox so they can eat together. When he opens it, he finds barbecue, which is an unusual thing to eat first thing in the morning. Mizuho admits that it is actually her breakfast. They sit down and Shin watches her eat while she explains that she needs the extra protein to build stamina for her meeting with an artist later. She begins talking about how the new story is shaping up and confidently declares that it will be a hit. She grows so enthusiastic that she starts choking on her food. Shin immediately hands her a drink and reminds her about their agreement to meet everyone for the fireworks festival by the Seagull statue at 6 in the evening in 2 days. Mizuho calms down and tells him not to worry. She adds that everyone is surprised Shin managed to take half a day off to attend the festival, since he is the busiest among their group. Mizuho stands and walks a few steps away, growing wistful as she thinks about their last festival together. It happened 10 years ago, when they almost couldn't attend because of the pandemic. The event still pushed through, and it became an important shared memory for all of them. Shin watches her back, stubbornly curious. Mizuho checks the time and says she has to leave. She promises to see him again in 2 days, but before she goes, Shin asks if she has been in contact with Kazuki. Mizuho freezes and then gives him a small, clipped smile as she admits that she has not. Shin asks if they can talk privately later after they attend the festival. That evening, Shugo and Iru finish dinner and chat casually, both missing Mizuho since she couldn't join them this time. They mention that Mizuho seems to be in a particularly good mood lately. They then shift the conversation to Kazuki, as he's been absent from their lives as of late. Iru says he is confident that Kazuki will not show up at the festival. He and Shugo talk about Kazuki's career, recalling how the last time they heard, he was overseas on a business trip. It has been 3 years since either of them last spoke to him. Kazuki apparently suffered from an injury, and even though he is supposed to make a full recovery, he quit swimming and then completely ghosted the group, including Mizuho. Iru is especially upset that Kazuki never even reached out to Mizuho. He vents his frustration and is about to swear that he will make Kazuki pay, but Shugo suddenly cuts in, saying that he will be the one to teach Kazuki a lesson for making Mizuho so upset. The declaration catches Iru off guard since Shugo looks even angrier than he does, as they are all fiercely protective of Mizuho. On the night of the festival, the grounds overflow with excitement. People wander between food stalls and game booths as the air fills with laughter and music. Mizuho walks alone through the festival, her thoughts drifting into nostalgia. She notices a group of boys wearing her old high school's jerseys, and it immediately pulls her back into the past. 10 years ago, she was still in high school, attending the fireworks with her friends. Kazuki had been absent when they watched it together. She remembers running back to school and jumping into the pool to meet Kazuki. She had gotten her uniform drenched in water that evening, but she had managed to spend the last few moments of the fireworks with him. At that time, she believed she wanted Kazuki by her side, no matter how much time passed. A message from Shugo pulls her out of her thoughts. He says he will be late because the person who is supposed to come in to take over his shift has yet to arrive. Iru also messages the group chat, explaining that he is on the train, but will arrive in about 30 minutes due to how cramped it is. Mizuho stares at her phone, unable to believe her luck. She desperately hopes that Shin will at least arrive on time. Instead, Shin suddenly has to deal with an emergency case and rushes a patient into the hospital's emergency room. Mizuho waits by the statue where they promised to meet. While others litter the grounds with friends and loved ones, she remains alone. The fireworks begin, and she watches them from her spot, feeling lonely. Then she hears the familiar jingle of a bag charm. For a split second, she believes it is Kazuki. She turns, only to see a similar bag charm she had given Kazuki hanging from a young boy's bag. Mizuho feels disappointed and turns back to the fireworks, only to see the familiar figure of Kazuki standing right in front of her. She cannot believe her eyes, but the longer she looks, the more undeniable it becomes that it really is Kazuki. She slowly walks up to him and asks why he is back. Without hesitation and fixing his gaze on her, Kazuki says that he came to see her. Tears well in Mizuho's eyes. 10 years ago, she knew without a doubt that what she shared with Kazuki was a special kind of love. In 2020, Kazuki trains relentlessly in the pool, pushing himself to break his own swimming records. As he finishes, his coach times him and confidently tells him that he keeps improving and clearly has a future as a competitive swimmer. Kazuki rushes outside to meet Mizuho, who waits for him to finish practice and take a shower. His hair is still wet when he reaches her, and Mizuho scolds him for not drying off properly. Kazuki insists he hurried because he did not want to keep her waiting. Mizuho huffs, reminding him that they are only running Christmas errands together, so there is no need to rush. As she starts to leave, Kazuki suddenly tells her that he has made real progress. His coach had said he would likely make the training team next year and even compete in that season's events. Determination fills his eyes as if he wants to say more, but he holds back. Instead, he simply tells Mizuho that he expects her to be there to cheer him on. Mizuho was expecting a different conversation, but nonetheless promises to do so. That evening, Shugo proudly admires the cake roll he baked, claiming it is the best one yet, while Iru teases him for saying the exact same thing every year. As they wait, Shugo complains about how late everyone is. They had sent Mizuho and Kazuki to buy last-minute supplies, while Shin is busy with preparatory school for college. Iru quietly admits that he has a feeling Mizuho and Kazuki will not show up. He explains that whenever he sees the two of them together, he wonders how long their friend group can really stay the same and celebrate parties together. The waiter's words settles over them, until Shin suddenly arrives, apologizing for being late because he stopped somewhere on the way. He clutches a small paper bag in his hand. At the same time, Kazuki and Mizuho are stuck at the train station. An announcement comes on saying that all trains are delayed due to the bad weather. Kazuki sneezes from the cold, and Mizuho immediately wraps her scarf around him. She scolds him for not bringing his own, reminding him that he always gets cold easily. Kazuki stubbornly says he does not want to go home and suggests they skip the party, reasoning that their friends will let it pass. Mizuho quickly shuts that down, insisting they get on the train as soon as it arrives. When she sits back down, Kazuki asks what she is so afraid if they stop being just childhood friends. He admits that he has been in love with her for a long time and says he wants to spend Christmas and New Year's with her alone as a couple. Then he goes even further and says he wants to marry her someday. Mizuho is stunned into silence. The train arrives without her giving him an answer, so they return to their familiar street where the party is being held. Mizuho feels guilty for dodging his confession, sensing that she upset him when Kazuki suddenly says he's going home first to drop his things. She watches his retreating figure as guilt fills her. At the party, Iru and Shugo fool around while Shin watches the window quietly from the side. Meanwhile, Kazuki lies weakly on his bed, no longer wanting to join the celebration. He turns over just as Mizuho enters his room. Mizuho walks over and notices that he is running a fever. She helps him get more comfortable by helping him take off his layers while gently scolding him for always making her worry. She glances to the ground and he pats her head as she continues to tell them to stop calling her by her nickname and to stop looking at her so lovingly, because it makes her uneasy because her thoughts suddenly get filled with him. Drowsy but elated over the affection he is receiving from her, Kazuki asks her to think about him more. His eyes suddenly look at her like she is the most precious thing in the world. Seeing her teary face, he slowly draws her closer, testing to see if Mizuho will pull back. Their lips almost meet, but Mizuho's phone suddenly rings. She pulls back and answers her phone. She assures Iru that she is fine and promises to join them soon. She moves toward the door, promising Kazuki that she will bring him cake, food, and their friends later, and that he should rest first so he can get better. Kazuki looks at her with longing but nonetheless agrees with her plan. Mizuho hesitates and goes back and kisses him. Kazuki asks what that kiss means, which only leaves her more confused. He leans in and kisses her himself, asking again if she is still unsure. Mizuho can only respond with a blushing face, so he pulls her into another kiss, quietly asking her to stay with him a little longer. In front of Kazuki, Mizuho lashes out at him for suddenly showing up after disappearing for 3 years without contacting any of them. She tells him he cannot just come back whenever he wants because whatever relationship they once had is already over. After saying her piece, she turns and runs away, refusing to hear anything else from him when he calls out to her. As she pushes through the festival crowds, questions race through her mind. She keeps wondering why he ever left her in the first place, and how that unanswered pain continues to haunt her for the past 3 years. As Kazuki and Mizuho kiss that night, Kazuki refuses to settle for a simple one. He pushes Mizuho onto the bed to deepen the kiss, and to his delight, she actually kisses him back. They fail to notice how far they move until they slip off the edge of the bed and tumble to the floor. After realizing what happened, they can only smile, understanding that this marks the beginning of something they both truly want. Mizuho suddenly remembers the first time she met Kazuki. He was just a shy boy who had just moved into the neighborhood. From that day on, their friendship grew and the two became inseparable, and she'd always wanted him by her side more than the others in their group. Even though the nature of her feelings changed over time, looking at him now makes Mizuho realize that she still wants to be with Kazuki. She gently cups his face and Kazuki asks if she still sees him as a younger brother. Mizuho pulls her hand away, stands up, and walks toward the door. She gives him a glance and tells him that from now on he is her boyfriend. Then she leaves, completely certain that she wants to be together with Kazuki. Back in his room, Kazuki stays behind, trying to process the fact that they are officially dating. At the party, the rest of the boys try to enjoy themselves, but Shin keeps glancing out the window, waiting for Mizuho to arrive. Eventually, Iroh goes to look for her and finds her waiting by the front gate. He is surprised but plays it off casually. He brushes the snow from her shoulders and invites her inside, but Mizuho refuses and hands him the food for the party instead. She explains that she cannot stay because she needs to visit Chika, then quickly leaves, leaving Iroh staring after her. Shin later finds Iroh outside and asks what is wrong. As Iroh heads back toward the house, he tells Shin that they should eat the roasted chicken Mizuho had dropped off. He adds that Mizuho had decided to be at Chika's place instead of attending the party. Before going inside, he also tells Shin to always look after Mizuho and Kazuki regardless of the outcome. Shin pauses, needing a moment to understand what Iroh means before following him back inside. Later that night, Iroh and Shin decide to head home, leaving Shugo behind to finish tidying up and to set aside some things for Mizuho for when she returns. After they leave, Shugo sighs, thinking about how Mizuho was the one who wanted to celebrate the most, yet ended up missing the party. He carefully covers the cake for her, disappointed that she did not get to enjoy it together with everyone else. On the last day of school, Mizuho tells Chika that she still wants to talk to Shin about her decision. She is caught off guard when Shin messages her, inviting her to go ice skating after class. After school, they meet at the ice rink. Mizuho struggles to put on her skates, so Shin kneels down to help her. Once she is ready, Shin skates ahead and encourages her to follow. Mizuho pushes off but wobbles almost immediately before slipping and falling onto the ice. She gets back up, and the two move to the side of the rink. They brush the ice off while Shin comments on how bad Mizuho has gotten at skating. Mizuho's curiosity gets the best of her, so she asks Shin why he asked her to go skating with him. Shin admits that he wants to try coming to the rink with just her. Normally, the five of them always go together, and with Iroh and Shugo fooling around, he never gets a quiet moment alone with her. He confesses that he wants to experience the rink as a couple so they can hold hands, drink hot chocolate together, and give her a Christmas present. Even though he knows Mizuho does not like changing the balance of their friend group, he cannot deny his feelings for her. He then asks if he lost to Kazuki. Mizuho is surprised that he figured it out so quickly, but she calmly admits that she and Kazuki are now dating. Disappointment washes over Shin. He quietly admits that he had hoped Mizuho would fall for him before realizing that her heart already belonged to Kazuki. They stop to buy hot chocolate, and Shin admits that the drink is too sweet for him. Mizuho looks visibly downcast, and Shin tells her that after today, things will probably change and that they may not be able to be friends after this, or at worst, it will stay friends but will no longer be close. He walks a few steps ahead, leaving Mizuho shaken by the thought of losing one of her best friends. Suddenly, Shin throws a snowball at her, bluntly revealing that he is only joking. He reassures her that she can always come to him whenever she needs to vent, and that they can stay friends. Smiling, he tells her to cheer up while teasing her lightly. Mizuho bristles and starts throwing snowballs back at him. Shin dodges and throws some back. Watching her with tears he refuses to let fall. He loves her, and he cannot deny that truth to himself. Mizuho has always been special to him, and the thought of losing her makes his heart break. Still, he tries to smile through everything for her sake. As he is so caught up in his thoughts of her, Shin does not realize that it begins to snow. He looks up when he finally notices, just as Mizuho steps closer to admire the beauty of the falling snowflakes. Shin watches her and decides that he cannot give up on her. He tells her to try to make things work with Kazuki, but stops himself just as he is about to suggest that they get together in 10 years if things do not work out. Mizuho looks at him curiously, but Shin keeps the thought to himself for now and invites her to head back with him. Mizuho asks him to wait a moment, saying she wants to do something first. Shin watches her run off, then turns his attention back to the present he had planned to give her. He remembers when they were kids, walking home from school, when Mizuho had suddenly stopped him to give him a gift. She handed him her pencil case, which confused him. When he opened it, he let out a startled scream as a praying mantis scared him. Their friends laughed at his reaction while he scolded Mizuho for giving him a bug. Mizuho apologized sincerely, explaining that she honestly thought he would be happy because he likes animals. Despite the experience, Shin's heart fluttered. He then recalls the time he ran for the student council. Their friends had helped him campaign after school, but Mizuho was unable to attend one event because she had to retake a math exam. Shin waited for her at the train station so they could go home together. When Mizuho arrived and apologized for missing the event, he asked if she felt confident about her exam. She admitted that she was not sure, which reminded him of how he claims he is not attracted to dumb girls. Mizuho sat beside him and handed him a paper bag saying it was a present. When Shin looked inside, he was surprised to find several hand-drawn posters for his campaign. As Mizuho ended up falling asleep next to him, his heart fluttered. She has always done small things like this that quietly warm his heart. He gently pulled her closer so she could rest against his shoulder, letting the train continue on so she could sleep a little longer. Mizuho soon returns to his side, offering him a warm can of coffee as thanks for the hot chocolate, since she knew Shin did not enjoy the drink. Thanking her, he suggests that they should head back before the train stopped running due to the snow. Mizuho had never noticed the necklace he had hung on a snowman. At Cafe River, an older Mizuho waits for Shin, still unable to process the fact that Kazuki has come back after all these years. Shin arrives and apologizes for being late as well as for missing the fireworks festival. He explains that since Iru and Shugo also missed it, the two of them asked him to treat Mizuho today instead, since she went to the fireworks festival all alone. They decide to look at the menu so they can start their meal. After they finish eating, they walk by the river to look at the lights, with Mizuho lightly teasing him about his title as a doctor. Shin admits that he feels bad about missing the fireworks and finds himself thinking about the ones in Kogahama. Mizuho asks where Kogahama is and points in front of them. Shin corrects her, gesturing in a different direction as he explains where the areas actually are. He points to several other locations before adding that they cannot see any of them from where they are standing anyway. He then casually mentions that he recently learned from his mother that Kazuki is actually living near Tsukishima. At the sound of Kazuki's name, Mizuho finally opens up and tells Shin that Kazuki was at the fireworks festival the previous evening. Shin is surprised and Mizuho continues, explaining that Kazuki told her that he came home to see her. She admits that she refused to continue the conversation with Kazuki and had said harsh things to him before running away. Mizuho tells Shin that no matter what Kazuki says, it is already over between them. Shin fixes her with a serious stare and asks if her heart has truly moved on from Kazuki. Her eyes glisten with unshed tears as she admits that she still loves him, a realization that only deepens her confusion. She desperately asks Shin what she needs to do. Seeing the conflict in her expression, Shin bluntly tells her that she should end things with Kazuki, and that he is willing to help her. Mizuho looks at him in confusion. Shin explains that he wanted to say that to her during the fireworks festival, if only he had arrived on time. He then confesses that he still has feelings for her and wants to try dating her. He asks for her permission to confirm his feelings for himself, then pulls her into a hug. All his emotions rush back as he remembers how perfectly Mizuho fit in his arms when they were teenagers, and even now she still feels like she belongs with him. He recalls the moment when they were teens and he wanted to suggest they start dating if she were single again when they were older. Hugging her now, Shin confirms that his feelings have never changed for Mizuho. Shin fixes her with a kind stare and tells Mizuho to take her time with her answer. After school, Iru decides to spend some time alone to think away from home. His thoughts keep drifting back to Mizuho and how she suddenly left without attending their Christmas party. He then spots Kazuki jogging toward him because Kazuki had called out to him. Iru treats him to a drink of water, which he is thankful for. Iru takes in his sweaty appearance and comments on how energetic he is for someone who is supposedly absent from school because of a fever. Kazuki looks unusually cheerful and admits that once his fever passed, he suddenly felt the urge to run. To prove his point, Kazuki grabs Iru's hand and presses it against his forehead. Iru's eyes widen at the warmth and Kazuki's radiating happiness, confirming his suspicions about Kazuki's and Mizuho's status. Iru sits beside him and ruffles Kazuki's hair, congratulating him on his relationship with Mizuho. Kazuki beams and asks if he somehow let it slip, because he does not recall telling Iru about what had happened last night. Iru grins and says he can tell because Kazuki looks happier than ever, which is a dead giveaway. Kazuki admits that it feels good knowing Mizuho always cares about him. Seeing how deeply she worries for him makes him want to do better and strengthens his love for her. As Kazuki excitedly talks about Mizuho, Iru suddenly leans in and kisses him, causing the bottle to spill and leaving Kazuki stunned. Iru pulls back, fixes Kazuki with a forlorn look, and tells him that Mizuho is not the only one who has been watching over him. Mizuho is still shaken by Kazuki's sudden appearance. Her thoughts are interrupted when she notices Iru calling her. When she answers, Iru asks if Shin had taken her out and apologizes for missing the fireworks festival. As Mizuho responds, Iru immediately notices the strain in her voice and asks if something has happened. Mizuho admits that she ran into Kazuki at the festival. She describes the encounter as strange, especially since things between them have been over for years. Sensing that she needs comfort, Iru tells her that he is calling from their old secret hideout. He gently reassures her that no matter what choice she makes, she can always count on him to be by her side. Mizuho recognizes the promise as it is the same one they had made to each other when they were younger. Smiling faintly, she thanks Iru for reminding her. When Iru hangs up, he looks at the starry sky stretching in front of him. After kissing Kazuki, Iroh recalls that he recognized his feelings back in 6th grade. He was on his graduation trip with his classmates, listening as his friends excitedly talked about the cute girls in their year. Iroh could not relate to them at all. A teacher soon entered their room and scolded everyone to go to sleep. As the lights went out, Iroh lay awake, unable to rest. That is when he noticed that Kazuki had rolled over into his bed. Flustered, Iroh immediately scolded him and told him to go back to his own bed, turning away to hide his embarrassment. In that moment, he understood something clearly. While his classmates were drawn to girls, the one he liked was Kazuki. When he returned home from the trip, Iroh asked his mother, Sarina, why she chose his father. Sarina thought about it for a moment before telling him that his father does not have many desirable traits. He is the only person who never judged her. She gently encouraged Iroh to talk more openly about his own feelings, but Iroh refused. As time passed, he grew more hopeless, knowing that Kazuki only had eyes for Mizuho. As they grew older, Iroh became distant from their group. Mizuho and the others worried about him and even asked around school, but no one knew what he had been up to. Around this time, Iroh was involved with a rough crowd and started getting into fights. He was no longer thinking things through as he was in a constant state of confusion. To him, he believed that there was something wrong with him. One afternoon, he wandered into an arcade to pass the time. Even after finishing a few games, he remained bored. That is when he spotted Ammon, his class representative. Iroh approached him, appearing as if they had been good friends. Ammon looked nervous and asked about why Iroh never showed up in school anymore. Iroh ignored the question and instead asked Ammon to lend him some money. When Ammon refused, Iroh tried to pressure him further. He only stopped when he heard Kazuki calling out his name and trying to rush towards them. Iroh felt something stir and he made a run for it. Quickly, Iroh hid back inside the arcade as Kazuki finally reached Ammon. Kazuki could not see where Iroh ran off to, so he asked Ammon if he knew which way he went. Instead of answering directly, Ammon only gave him something vague. Back in the arcade, Ammon approached the machine where Iroh was hiding behind. He told Iroh that the two of them lived in completely different worlds, and that after graduation, they would likely never meet again. Ammon explained that even though they were different, he could tell that Iroh was suppressing his true self. Iroh refused to listen and brushed him off, but Ammon continued, admitting that they were similar because he too was hiding who he really was. After Ammon left, his words only agitated Iroh further. Fueled by frustration, Iroh wandered around and deliberately picked fights with other people, even members of his own gang. It was Toya who eventually found him and put a stop to him beating one of his members by tightly grasping his bleeding hand. Toya told Iroh to go home, saying that this kind of world did not suit him. Iroh spat in Toya's face and declared that he did not want to go home. He added that he doesn't even have a home to return to. In truth, he desperately wanted to escape the world he had dragged himself into. That evening, Toya brought Iroh back to his flat to clean and bandage his wounds. Iroh learned that Toya was still in high school and lived alone. His mother had left with another man and his father was rarely home because of work. Iroh scoffed and called Toya an idiot for letting him into his flat. He reasoned that he could easily steal something and run away. Toya only shrugged and reassured him that Iroh was not the kind of person who would steal from him. He claimed that he could understand people simply by looking at them. Toya tossed Iroh a change of clothes and told him he could get changed and even stay the night if he wanted. Intrigued, Iroh asked if Toya could see through him. The words spilled out before he could stop them. Iroh confessed that he thought he liked men and that it felt wrong to him. Toya stared at him for a moment before calmly saying that he was not weird at all. He pointed out that Iroh always looked pained whenever he fought others. Toya gently patted Iroh on the head and told him to get some rest. That night, Iroh slept on Toya's couch, quietly crying as he stared at a photo of Kazuki on his phone. For some reason, Toya's words hurt more than any punch because they exposed the truth he had been hiding. Despite his initial struggle to fall asleep, it was actually the first night Iroh managed to rest well. The next morning, Iroh was still asleep on the couch while Toya went about his routine. Toya stepped closer to adjust Iroh's blanket, but noticed Iroh's phone ringing beside him. On the screen, it showed Iroh had several messages and calls from his family and friends. Later that day, they met up with the rest of their group. Many of the members were dissatisfied and eager to start a fight with Kenzaki's gang, but Toya firmly refused to let anyone cause trouble. Iroh watched as the other members argued over what to do. On his phone, he saw that he had several missed calls and text messages from his mother and friends. Toya noticed Iroh looking longingly at his phone and encouraged him to answer it, noting that Iroh's family and friends must have been worried about him. Iroh ignored his suggestion and instead went up to Toya. He motioned to his earlobes, where 2 new earrings were placed. He told Toya that he had just gotten them pierced because he noticed Toya's were pierced and thought it looked cool, so he copied him. He declared all of this with a smile, so Toya threw him a helmet and told him to hop on because they needed to go somewhere. Airo excitedly followed him, leaving the rest of the gang behind. During the ride, Airo truly enjoyed it, feeling free for the first time. He made sure that Toya could hear how happy he was. After a few days, the other gang members beat Airo up. To them, Airo was someone in their way and only served as a distraction to their boss. They had noticed Toya's favoritism toward Airo, so they wanted to remind him that he wasn't really a member of the gang as none of them accepted him. They left Airo beaten on the ground and after throwing more insults at him, decided to leave him there. After a while, Airo managed to recover, but it was still too painful for him to drag himself anywhere, and he also had no idea where to go. He suddenly thought of Kazuki and briefly considered wanting to disappear for good. By his side, he received a message from Mizuho instructing him to go to Whale Park. Mizuho had left for the park in a hurry. She wasn't too sure, but she had a feeling that Airo would show up there. To her relief, Airo was on top of the whale playground, so she hurried to meet him. She noticed that Airo was severely injured and tried to convince him to go with her to the hospital to get treated, but Airo only responded by grasping her hand and asking her out. Mizuho looked at him in confusion, and he explained that he hated himself at the moment, but he believed that by dating Mizuho, he would start changing for the better. His mind drifted to how happy Kazuki was from loving Mizuho, so he yearned for the same happiness. Mizuho angrily rejected his confession and accused him of not really loving her. The statement shocked Airo before Mizuho took a gentler tone. Cradling his face and leaning close, Mizuho told him that she didn't need to be his girlfriend to stay by his side. She hugged him tightly and promised to always stay by Airo, regardless of the decisions he would make in life. Airo finally found the courage to admit to himself that he wanted to go home and be with them. However, he was at a loss for what to do. Meanwhile, Toya's gang was laughing about what they had done to Airo. They didn't realize that Toya was actually there, watching them from the bridge. He called them to ask where Airo was, but they pretended to be ignorant about where they had left him. Suddenly, Mizuho's friends arrived at the gang's hangout, asking about Airo's whereabouts. Kazuki, overcome with worry, demanded to know where Airo was, explaining to the gang that Airo had left home and that everyone was worried about him. Shugo and Shin tried to calm him down, but it was Toya's voice that stopped him. Toya regarded the boys and asked what Airo meant to them. Without hesitation, Kazuki answered that Airo was his most precious child and friend. Toya noted the determined look in Kazuki's eyes, understanding that Kazuki was probably the boy Airo really loved. He began leaving the scene and announced that he didn't know where Airo was since Airo hadn't told him anything. However, he shared that he now understood what Airo was feeling and why he didn't want to go home. He told Kazuki and the others that Airo really loved all of them and that he was scared. Toya ended up driving home alone that evening. Airo hadn't gone home to his friends right away. He eventually got caught in a gang fight. Luckily, he managed to remain unscratched and was hiding from the police when Toya found him and helped hide him. Toya tried to convince him to head home again, explaining that this kind of world was not where Airo belonged and that he should return to his childhood friends. Airo argued that Toya's gang had started the fight, so he had actually been on his way to find Toya to warn him. When Toya refused to bring him along, Airo stubbornly insisted on going with him. Toya cornered him and his body language seemed to hint he intended to kiss Airo. The act alone began to scare Airo enough for him to push Toya away. He crumpled into a kneel-in position and Toya promised that he wouldn't do anything to Airo. He began to get ready to head out and asked Airo if Kazuki was the one he liked. Before he left, he told Airo that Kazuki would not run away from him if he confessed and encouraged Airo to face his feelings. When Airo heard the roar of the engine, he turned to scream at Toya to stop, but it was already too late. Now, Airo has confessed and even kissed Kazuki. After a moment of silence, Airo abruptly gets up and apologizes for scaring him. He begins to walk away, insisting that he doesn't need a reply. However, Kazuki shocks him by grabbing his hand and rejecting his confession. Kazuki explains that he can't go out with him because he loves Mizuho. Still, to Kazuki, this doesn't change the fact that Airo is his precious childhood friend. He confesses that he still wants to walk to and from school together, go to the beach, and continue doing all the fun things they usually do. He then asks Airo if he's allowed to stay by his side, even if he isn't his boyfriend. The request reminds Airo of the promise Mizuho once made to him. Airo's eyes begin to fill with tears as he tightens his grip around Kazuki's hand. He confirms that he still wants Kazuki to be part of his life. As Shugo prepares his restaurant for opening, he gets a visit from his older brother, Togo, who jokingly places an order the moment he walks in. The brothers exchange playful banter, their familiarity evident in every word. As Togo looks around, he notices how clean and well-maintained the restaurant is, clearly impressed. Shugo boasts about both the place and himself, proudly declaring that he always gives his best when it comes to cooking. After a beat, Togo casually asks how Shugo's personal life has been lately, especially now that Kazuki is back in town. Shugo mutters something under his breath, but Togo doesn't quite catch it. Instead of repeating himself, Shugo turns away and serves Togo an entire baguette. On New Year's Eve, Tsuyoshi, Mizugo's father, checks on her in her room. He reminds her that they will be spending the New Year's celebration at Airu's house with everyone else. As he talks, he notices Mizugo's subdued mood and realizes that none of her friends have come to visit her all day. He assumes they are all busy preparing for their entrance exams and quietly leaves her room to prepare. Once alone, Mizugo straightens her posture. She resolves to live with her decision and face whatever consequences come with it, aware that things will change with her friends. At the New Year's party, only the parents of the main group are present, as the kids are all occupied. Tsuyoshi suddenly breaks down, admitting that he feels Mizugo has been lonely lately and that he doesn't know how to help her as a father. Serena and the others try to comfort him, reassuring him that Mizuho is grown up now and capable of handling things on her own. Serena shares that she usually lets Airu make his own choices, but if the time ever comes when he asks for help, she will protect him without hesitation. As everyone praises Serena's devotion, they fail to notice Airu quietly overhearing the conversation. Hearing his mother's support makes him feel ready to tell her the truth. After the party, while cleaning up, Airu comes across an old photo of Serena from her high school days. He smiles at it, amused by how young and wild she looks. Serena begins to talk about the photo, but Airu interrupts her, admitting that he confessed to Kazuki on Christmas. He slowly explains why he ran away from home in middle school and apologizes for it. Serena stops what she's doing, turns to face him, and tells him that no matter who he becomes or what he currently is, he will always be her son. Airu's tears begin to fall as he crouches on the ground, overwhelmed with relief that his mother still accepts him despite everything. Serena places a gentle, supportive hand on him and offers to make him something warm to drink, her voice steady and reassuring. Later that night, Shugo opens his phone, intending to ask the group if they still plan on watching the first sunrise together. After staring at the message for a moment, he deletes it and tries to go back to bed. Still, something nags at him, refusing to let him rest. Giving in to his feelings, Shugo calls Mizuho and tells her that he wants to see her to give her a Christmas present. He asks her to come to Koigahama, where they had first met. Mizuho hesitates, uneasy about showing up after missing the Christmas party. Shugo gently challenges her, asking if that alone is enough to break their friendship. He reminds her that they were the first to meet and become friends when they were kids, before they became friends with the other three. Since then, they have shared countless irreplaceable moments and spent nearly every holiday together. To Shugo, the fact that Mizuho has decided to date Kazuki shouldn't be a reason for them to drift apart. They have been through too much together to simply throw it all away. Realizing that Shugo is right, Mizuho quickly gets ready and sprints toward the beach. As she approaches Koigahama, she hears familiar voices carried by the wind. She sees all four of them already there, with Kazuki and Airu playfully chasing each other on the sand and Shin trying to avoid getting caught in their game. They notice her arrival and smile warmly. As she approaches hesitantly, Shugo announces that this reunion is her Christmas present. The boys all share how Shugo barged into their rooms and dragged them out of bed just for her. As they laugh among themselves over the entire situation, Mizuho laughs along, feeling more secure and confident in her bond with them. Kazuki is the first to notice the warmth on his back. As he turns around, the others follow and all of them watch the sunrise together. Mizuho realizes that change is inevitable and that they will continue to change every day. Almost as if reading her thoughts, Shin comments that they have moved forward together. She finds herself agreeing with him. Turning to Shugo, Mizuho thanks him, saying it's the best Christmas present she has ever received. Kazuki immediately hugs Shugo from behind, expressing his gratitude as well, though the others groan and remind him that the mess is partially his fault. Airu then playfully pushes Kazuki toward the ocean, declaring that he should swim as punishment. Laughing, Mizuho goes over to join them, leaving Shin and Shugo behind to talk in private. Shin bluntly calls Shugo a hypocrite, pointing out that he is the one who isn't being honest with himself, fully aware that Shugo also has feelings for Mizuho. Shugo doesn't deny it. Instead, he calmly responds that getting everything usually means becoming someone's third priority. The statement confuses Shin for a moment, but Shugo only looks at him knowingly and coaxes him to rejoin the others so they can all enjoy it together. When they regroup, the five of them decide to head to the shrine together. Everyone agrees until Kazuki suddenly realizes that he's still wearing his pajamas, earning laughter from the entire group. Mizuho can't help but feel grateful. Seeing everyone like this again reassures her that, no matter what changes, they are all moving forward together. Eventually, school starts up again. One afternoon, Mizuho overhears a group of girls talking about how much they want to see Kazuki's face before heading home. Listening to them, she feels a small ache in her chest, reminded of just how popular Kazuki is. Deciding to avoid overthinking it, Mizuho starts heading home alone, only to be suddenly pulled into Kazuki's arms. Grinning, he asks why she's planning to leave by herself and they're dating. As he insists they go home together, Mizuho blushes, reminded once again of the change in their relationship. She wonders why she can't be as honest and confident about her feelings as Kazuki is. Earlier, before she had gone to the lockers, Shugo had pretended to complain about receiving too many chocolates for Valentine's Day, much to Mizuho's annoyance. Airu then surprised her by revealing that he had organized a group karaoke outing along with a chocolate exchange with other people, impressing her with how sociable he is. The boys later wonder where Shin disappeared to, and Mizuho explains that he went straight to cram school. Meanwhile, Shin was spending the afternoon turning down girls one after another, all of them failing to give him chocolates. As the day winds down, Shugo prepares to head home, but casually tells Mizuho not to expect chocolates from him. Confused, she asks why, and Shugo explains that he can't give chocolates to someone else's girlfriend. Mizuho accepts the explanation, but Airu notices the faint, troubling look lingering on her face. Back in the present, on her walk home with Kazuki, Mizuho realizes that she doesn't have any plans for Valentine's Day, even though she had bought chocolates to give him. Her thoughts feel scattered, lingering on everything that has changed between them. Kazuki notices that Mizuho seems distracted. He gently grabs her hand and cheerfully tells her that he's happy, saying that Mizuho finally belongs to him. The words catch her off guard. Without thinking, Mizuho pulls her hand away, shocking Kazuki. Realizing what she's done, she quickly apologizes, explaining that she isn't used to it yet. Embarrassed, she steps forward and urges them to keep walking. When she gets home, Mizuho collapses onto her bed, burying her face in her pillow as she grumbles about her reaction earlier. Her eyes drift to her desk, where the chocolates still sit untouched. She regrets not giving them to him. Deciding she can't just leave things like this, she sends Kazuki a message asking him out on a date that Sunday. However, he replies that he can't make it since he'll be starting his training camp tomorrow, which runs until the 16th. Mizuho is shocked, realizing she hadn't remembered him mentioning a camp at all. After a moment hesitation, she simply sends him a message telling him to do his best during training. The next day, Kazuki rereads the text, feeling the quiet disappointment that Mizuho hasn't contacted him since then. At the same time, Mizuho is equally frustrated with herself, still upset about letting go of his hand during their walk home. She goes to Airu's place to return his missing earphones. Airu immediately notices that she looks down and asks what's wrong, but before she can answer, an incoming video call from Kazuki lights up her phone. Kazuki greets her energetically, and Mizuho brightens at the sight of him. Before they can say much, his teammates suddenly crowd into view, grabbing the phone and reminding him about an upcoming meeting. Kazuki hurriedly apologizes before ending the call. Airu doesn't miss the disappointment on Mizuho's face. He gently tells her not to think that she doesn't deserve Kazuki, reassuring her that Kazuki loves her deeply and that she's finally living the happiness she deserves. She boards the train with a box of chocolates in hand, deciding that she wants to see Kazuki, even if only briefly, to give them to him. As she heads toward the training camp venue, she convinces herself that it's important for Kazuki to know how strongly she feels. When she arrives at the stadium, she's overwhelmed by how massive it is and quickly finds herself lost. A coach approaches her and asks if she's a relative of one of the athletes or an alum. When she reveals that she is neither a relative nor an alum, the coach tells her that she isn't allowed inside. Realizing there's no way for her to hand over the present herself, Mizuho tries asking if he can at least deliver the chocolates to Kazuki. The coach lets out an annoyed sigh, complaining that Kazuki always has fans trying to give him gifts this time of year. Being referred to as a fan makes Mizuho feel small. She lingers outside the stadium for several hours, wallowing in self-pity before finally deciding to head home. As she walks, a sudden sharp pain shoots through her foot from wearing new shoes, causing her to trip. She quickly picks up the chocolate box and dusts it off, feeling embarrassed by her impulsive decision and disappointed that she couldn't accomplish what she came to do. When she tries to stand, she hears hurried footsteps behind her. She turns and sees Kazuki, panting heavily. His expression is angry as he immediately scolds her for coming all the way here by herself. Mizuho panics, thinking she's truly upset him. She apologizes, explaining that she only wanted to see him and give him the chocolates, and that she planned to leave right after. Kazuki scolds her again for doing something so reckless, but his tone quickly softens. He explains that his coach told him a girl was looking for him, and he immediately felt it had to be her. Worried that something might have happened, he ran around searching for her. He pulls her into a tight hug, admitting how scared he was. In that moment, Mizuho recalls Airu's words and finally feels reassured that Kazuki truly loves her. Enjoying the embrace, she softly tells him that she wants to kiss him. Without hesitation, Kazuki pulls back just enough to kiss her properly. When they finally pull away, she smiles and tells him that he smells like the pool. Smiling softly at each other, they lean in for another kiss. During work at the manga studio, Mizuho is distracted and noticeably quiet. Her colleague Sakura approaches her, clearly having something on her mind. Mizuho senses trouble immediately, and just as Sakura starts to sink dramatically to her knees, Mizuho instinctively covers her ears, already assuming that Sakura has messed up another job and wants her help apologizing to a boss. Instead, Sakura grabs Mizuho's hand and begs her to have dinner with her. She explains that she and some friends are having a small party, but she didn't manage to invite enough people, so she really wants Mizuho to join them. Mizuho refuses at first, but Sakura insists that it's a great chance to meet new people and maybe even find a boyfriend. She mentions that she is aware Mizuho is currently single. Hearing this makes Mizuho think of both Kazuki and Shin. She feels conflicted over the two since she isn't completely over Kazuki. After a brief silence, she finally decides to turn the invitation down, reminding Sakura to return to work, but Sakura remains stubbornly persistent. In the past, the swim team members were talking about graduation and discussing what they should do for their seniors. Because of the pandemic, many events had been canceled and they hadn't gotten many chances to compete, but they still wanted to send their seniors off properly. They were sure their seniors had regrets over the past year and wanted to get them a bouquet. Listening to this, Kazuki grew thoughtful. Later, when he and Mizuho visited the beach together, he shared his concerns with her. Mizuho noted that even Kazuki had been deeply disappointed that he couldn't compete much the previous season. Kazuki explained that things were finally returning to normal, and he felt hopeful about making his mark this time. Still, he felt guilty because he could continue competing while many of his seniors would graduate without getting that same chance, all because he had been born a year later. During the graduation ceremony, Shin delivered the juniors' farewell message to their seniors. He wished them well and promised to lead the student body in their place after that day. When he finished, the entire student body applauded as the graduating students walked out of the gym. Outside, students mingled and exchanged final goodbyes. The seniors wanted to make their final memories of the school surrounded by familiar faces. Mizuho and the rest congratulated Shin for delivering a good message. To the side, Kazuki called out to Ryosuke, one of the senior swimmers, and together with the rest of the team, handed him a bouquet as a send-off. Receiving it, Ryosuke noticed their somber expressions and suddenly felt nostalgic about his high school years. He talked about how that day would be the last time he got to wear the uniform and walk around as a student. Throwing an arm around Kazuki, he invited the entire swim team back to the pool one last time. Kazuki was puzzled since the pool was empty and renovations were about to start, but Ryosuke insisted that everyone go. As they prepared to leave, he extended the invitation to Mizuho and the rest of Kazuki's childhood friends as well. When they arrived, several members were already riding around the empty pool. Iru smiled brightly at the graffiti, and the coach told them that they were free to write whatever they wanted since the pool would be renovated the following week and all the messages would eventually be covered up. The seniors wrote their dreams for the future, and the juniors wrote messages of hope and well wishes. Iru wrote about love in English so some students didn't understand, and Mizuho made sure to draw cartoon versions of all of them beside their messages. Shugo commented that he looked better in real life, which made Mizuho glare at him, unimpressed. While Iru took photos of their messages, Shugo noticed that Shin had yet to write anything, so he went over to hand him a marker so he could join in. Shin refused, choosing instead to keep his eyes trained on Mizuho, which Shugo noticed. As the pool gradually filled with graffiti, Kazuki stood slightly off to the side, not writing anything but watching his teammates write. Ryosuke approached him and asked out loud whether Kazuki was holding back because he felt sorry for him since he hadn't been able to compete much. Ryosuke admitted that he did feel frustrated, since it felt like the pandemic had stolen his last summer as a high school student, and he had graduated without really competing or showing off his skills as a swimmer. Kazuki began to feel regret, but what Ryosuke said next surprised him. Ryosuke shared that if the send-off meet had been canceled, he would have written those frustrations down that day. But now he felt differently. He began writing his message, and Kazuki's eyes widened as he read it. Ryosuke explained that what mattered most to him was the time he had spent with his team, even if he hadn't been able to compete as much as he wanted. Whenever he felt down, he could always count on his teammates to lift his spirits even off the pool. He cherished the moments after practice when they had just talked and laughed about silly things together. They had been more than teammates to him. He also remembered the panic he had felt when Kazuki first joined the swim team and nearly beat his freestyle record. The emotion he had felt that day had left a mark. Ryosuke said that his high school years had not been wasted, since they were filled with precious memories with all of them. In his message, he declared that he had spent his youth with the school's team and had no regrets. He told Kazuki that he would keep swimming in college, since he had realized how important swimming was to him after not being able to swim during the pandemic. He urged Kazuki to aim for the national high school competition and place high. He admitted that if Kazuki made it to the finals, he wanted to brag to his future team that they had been rivals back in high school and that they had swum on the same team. Finally, he thanked Mizuho for yelling at him at the bus stop, saying that it had become an unforgettable memory for him. Soon, the team began cheering and teasing Ryosuke because he was showing his passionate side. He laughed along with them, then suddenly got splashed with water. It turned out to be Kizuki who hit him, and he and his friends were armed with hoses, water guns, and all sorts of things for a water fight. Everyone joined in, congratulating their older members for graduating. The water fight grew more chaotic as everyone threw water balloons and splashed water at anyone regardless of age. Even Shin finally felt lighter from his earlier emotions and chose to join in on the fun himself. He suddenly felt brave enough to write his own message. Picking up a marker, he decided to write one of his own. Right after, however, Mizuho and Shugo splashed water at him, and he immediately jumped back into the water fight with both his childhood friends and the swim team. In his message, he wrote that he would not give up. Back in the present, Mizuho finds herself in a restaurant. In the end, she had agreed to go along with Sakura, but her mind kept drifting elsewhere. Sakura scolds her for zoning out and wonders if it's because one of the men is late. It turns out the party was somehow organized as a group date. One of the guests asks whether manga editors have interesting love lives. Sakura grabs Mizuho's shoulders and loudly declares that Mizuho has been single for 3 years. As Sakura speaks highly of her, Mizuho realizes that this dinner is clearly meant to set her up with someone new. She gently scolds Sakura for speaking too loudly, then politely engages in conversation with the men in front of her. While they talk, her eyes land on a nearby couple. Seeing them together makes her suddenly miss the time she spent as Kizuki's girlfriend. Uncomfortable, she excuses herself, claiming she needs some fresh air because she feels a little tipsy. As she heads outside, she feels that she has done enough to keep Sakura satisfied for now and decides to leave. But just as she is about to pass the restaurant, she runs into Kizuki, who has arrived with his junior to have dinner with Sakura's group. Before he heads into the restaurant, he sees Mizuho. His eyes widen when he recognizes her, and before either of them can react, they'd find themselves seated awkwardly next to each other back at the table. During dinner, Sakura begins openly flirting with Kizuki, even openly admitting she finds him handsome from every angle. This forces his embarrassed junior to apologize for her behavior, since she has a tendency to flirt with handsome men. Suddenly, a waitress arrives with a cake and asks who the birthday celebrant is. Sakura gestures to Mizuho, who is shocked to realize that the party was actually for her. Sakura admits that she had wanted to celebrate with her, and Mizuho is free to think of it as a belated celebration. As everyone begins congratulating her, she's asked to make a wish and blow out the candles. Kizuki stares at her, and Mizuho doesn't seem happy at all. She draws a blank as she looks at the lit candle, unsure of what she truly wants anymore. Kizuki notices her hesitation and, without warning, leans forward and blows out the candles for her, surprising everyone at the table. This moment is oddly reminiscent of their high school years, when Mizuho had once struggled to decide what to wish for on her birthday. She was going to blow out the candles on her cake with Kizuki. Back then, Kizuki had told her that she could wish for anything because she was the birthday girl, which made her answer back with sarcasm. Still, she had taken too long to decide. In the end, Kizuki had blown out the candles for her and announced that he had wished to be her boyfriend. She hadn't known it at the time, but perhaps that was something she had always wished for as well. Seeing that Mizuho does nothing, Kizuki suddenly grabs her hand and urges her to leave with him. Sakura and the others are stunned, since they know nothing about Mizuho's past with Kizuki. To avoid revealing the truth, Kizuki simply tells them that Mizuho just happens to resemble his first love, then pulls her out of the restaurant. As they walk outside, Mizuho stares at his back while being dragged along. Memories flood her mind about all the promises Kizuki had once made about staying with her, and how she had innocently believed him because of how earnest he had sounded. She remembers how confidently he had declared that he would be both her first and last boyfriend. Letting herself be pulled forward, she feels tears welling up from the weight of those memories. Still, she struggles to find her voice and follows along. By the time they reach the crossing bridge, she finally manages to whisper for him to let her go. But before Kizuki can respond, Shugo suddenly shouts at him to release her. Shugo steps in front of Mizuho protectively. His anger spills over as he shows Kizuki backward until he is near the edge of the stairs, shocking everyone with how furious he is. Kizuki struggles to push him off, not really wanting to cause any harm to Shugo. However, Shugo is too angry to feel it. He demands to know where Kizuki had been all these years and whether he had any idea how much Mizuho had suffered while he was gone. Consumed by his rage, Shugo does not realize how close they are to the staircase as he demands that Kizuki apologize to Mizuho. Mizuho screams a warning, but it is too late. Both men lose their balance and tumble down the stairs together, neither of them prepared for what had just happened. After the incident, Kizuki and Shugo end up in a hospital under Shin's care. Iru is also there immediately, fretting over Kizuki, overwhelmed since they haven't seen each other in 3 years. None of them had imagined this kind of reunion. Another doctor, Kuroda, informs Shin that neither of them has any fractures. Relieved but annoyed, Shin scolds them for getting into a fight on an overpass like reckless teenagers. Airu suddenly hugs Kizuki tightly in relief, prompting Shugo to huff that he's overreacting. Airu fires back that his reaction is completely normal since Mizuho made it sound like they were dying during her frantic phone call. He explains that he rushed over immediately after hearing the news and was shocked to see Kizuki bruised and wrestling with Shugo at the bottom of the stairs. Shugo grumbles that he had intended to go home after the fall, but Airu had taken his car keys, gotten behind the wheel, and driven all of them to the hospital. Shin cuts off their bickering, reminding them that they've already caused enough trouble for Mizuho. Kuroda is clearly amused by their bickering, so she decides to leave the rest to Shin. Once Kuroda steps out, Shin carefully checks Shugo again to ensure none of his injuries are serious. As he continues to scold them, Kizuki suddenly admits that Shugo has every right to be angry with him. He confesses that when he learned he might not be able to swim anymore back then, he felt worthless to Mizuho. He convinced himself she would eventually leave him. What he failed to understand was that she would have accepted him no matter what. Unbeknownst to them, Mizuho stands silently behind the curtain, overhearing everything, though she chooses not to reveal herself. Instead, she retreats to the vending machines where Kuroda finds her. The two end up sharing coffee. Kuroda strikes up a conversation since they are both acquainted with Shin. However, she mentions that although she and Shin know each other from college, she doesn't quite consider herself one of his close friends. Mizuho shares that she has known Shin since childhood and admits she envies his straightforward nature. She confesses that she wishes she had the courage to remain friends with Kizuki. Before Kuroda can ask what she means, Shugo approaches and tells Mizuho he's heading home. Mizuho insists on going with him, already planning to stay with her parents so she can keep an eye on him. Shugo reluctantly allows her to tag along, and they leave together. Meanwhile, Kizuki prepares to leave as well. Shin tells him that he'll properly lecture him another time, which strangely pleases Airu, reminding him of the past. But before Kizuki walks out, Shin firmly states that he has no intention of simply handing Mizuho back to him. Later, Shin rests briefly in his office where Kuroda informs him that Mizuho left with Shugo. Shin thanks her for her help and promises to treat her to a meal sometime. She replies that she wants to eat at a fancy restaurant. After he leaves, Kuroda returns to her desk to resume work, though her thoughts drift quietly to her unrequited feelings for Shin. Back in 2022, when Kuroda first met Shin, he had been new to campus and was completely lost. She had offered to walk him to his class, but when she got a better look at his face, she found herself falling in love at first sight. That moment marked the beginning of their friendship. One day, Kuroda asked Shin why he wanted to become a doctor. For her, becoming a doctor had been the logical choice because her family owned a hospital, so she was somehow expected to take over once she became a doctor. Shin hesitated at first, but eventually decided it was safe enough to share his reason. He told her that when he was a child, he had a close friend, though he never mentioned that it was Mizuho. Mizuho had lost her mother at a young age, yet she still forced herself to wear a cheerful smile every day. Shin, however, knew that she had been grieving all along. Watching her pretend to be okay had been painful for him. He said that he wanted to become a doctor so he could cure illnesses and prevent Mizuho from ever experiencing that kind of heartbreak again. Shin had brushed off his reasoning as lame, unaware that his words had stirred something deeply within Kuroda that day. On another afternoon, Kuroda approached Shin as she usually did so they could walk and talk together. Noticing that he looked exhausted, she lectured him about the importance of rest and how it was important for doctors. At that moment, Shin's attention shifted when Kizuki and Mizuho called out his name. He jogged over to them, and they told him they had just visited their hometown. Shin's mother had asked them to stop by and deliver some homemade food for him. Mizuho and Kizuki both expressed how happy they were to see him, with Kizuki asking how he had been doing. After chatting briefly, the two of them left hand in hand. Kuroda had silently observed the exchange and realized that Mizuho must have been the childhood friend in Shin's story, though her gaze lingered on their joined hands. As time passed, Shin began piling up absences at school, so Kuroda took it upon herself to bring him notes. When she arrived at his apartment, Shin had stepped out, accompanied by another girl. The girl left happily, telling Shin to invite her over again sometime. Kuroda was angered by what she saw and immediately asked Shin if he was dating the girl. Shin admitted that he wasn't, then allowed Kuroda into his apartment. She had offered him the notes she had brought from several of his classes and lectured him about his growing absences. If he continued like this, he might end up dropping out of the program altogether. Shin, however, casually told her that he didn't need the new notes and that she could take back the ones she had left during her previous visit. He then confessed that he no longer knew why he had wanted to become a doctor in the first place, so to him, studying was pointless. Kuroda walked further into the apartment and noticed a framed photo on his desk, one of him with his childhood friends. She reminded him firmly to focus on his studies and continue forward, mentioning that his original reason had been Mizuho. Shin snapped and cornered Kuroda against the wall, saying that the more he cares about someone, the more he hurts. His eyes then grew dark as he invited her to spend the evening with him. Understanding the implication, Kuroda shoved him away and shouted at him not to insult her or their studies as she bolted from his apartment. At their next class, Shin unexpectedly showed up and took the seat beside her. He slid the notes she had given him back across the desk and apologized, promising to treat her to a good meal. Kuroda readily accepted his apology, happy that their friendship had been restored. When class ended, Shin's friends approached him, happy that he was back. Without hesitation, he invited them to join him and Kuroda for a meal. Kuroda felt a flicker of surprise before realizing she had secretly hoped it would be just the two of them. He glanced back at her and asked where she wanted to eat. She answered that she wanted to go somewhere fancy. Shin smiled and agreed before turning forward again. In that quiet moment, Kuroda understood that what he had said the other night was true, that it really did hurt to care about someone. At present, Kuroda thinks about Mizuho's words and finally accepts the truth that no matter how close she stands beside Shin, she will always remain just a friend to him. Meanwhile, in Shugo's car, Shugo hands Mizuho an assortment of treats he had picked up while wandering around town in search of good restaurants. Mizuho's face lights up in pure delight, but her expression softens into something more thoughtful as she looks at him. She admits that she had been thinking about how Shugo always seemed to know how to cheer her up, no matter the situation. Shugo tries to keep his gaze forward as she eagerly begins digging into the treats, though his eyes drift back to her. When he had been younger, he used to believe that simply watching over her like this would have been enough to satisfy him, though he is beginning to think differently now. In the past, before the pandemic, Shugo had visited Mizuho to invite her to apply to the same high school as him. He entered her room carrying a pizza as an offering, only to find her sprawled on the floor, far more excited about the food than her entrance exam studies. She complained that the notes Shin had given her were too complicated to understand. When she showed him the cover, Shugo saw Shin's neat handwriting urging her to study hard so all of them could attend the same high school together. Swallowing his hesitation, Shugo echoed the same wish. Eventually, they settled at her small table to eat, though he couldn't shake the slight disappointment that he hadn't been the first to express that dream to her. In high school, Mizuho spent countless hours watching Kizuki during swim practice. Shugo accompanied her once and remarked on Kizuki's increasing popularity, curiously asking if she ever got bored. She insisted she didn't and said watching Ryosuke and Kizuki compete was fun. She cheered loudly when Kizuki swam, and her eyes never left the pool. Observing her watch the race, Shugo muttered a saying she didn't quite understand. He was also there, hidden at the entrance of the rooftop, when Kizuki confessed the extent of his feelings to Mizuho, and in that moment, Shugo understood that she would never be his. He distracted himself by listening to Minami play the piano. He tried to be friendly with her, but she kept him at arm's length. Half-jokingly, he mentioned that if he ever confessed to someone and got rejected, he hoped she might comfort him. Minami flatly refused but promised to play the piece she was practicing. When the notes drifted through the air, she told him the title of the song. In 2024, when job hunting began, Shugo visited Mizuho again with pizza in hand. He mentioned that her father had been worried about her recent sadness. Mizuho confessed she was considering quitting and debuting her manga. She felt left behind while everyone else moved forward with their careers, and her work still hadn't been published. Lately, she no longer felt happy with what she drew. With a fragile smile, she asked if she should start looking for a regular job. Shugo told her to stop forcing a smile. Still, he handed her the pizza and congratulated her on her decision, reassuring her to choose whatever path felt right. In 2028, he stood by her once more after Kizuki disappeared without a word. Mizuho seemed lifeless, which only deepened Shugo's anger. He cooked for her and urged her to eat, even suggesting she skip work. When she only stared at the food, he lifted a spoonful to her lips. After the first bite, she finally broke down in tears. When she looked at him again, light returned to her eyes as she thanked him for cheering her up. That evening, they laughed together. At present, Shugo feels irritation bubbling inside him as Mizuho gives him a cheeky smile, claiming it was because the food was so good. She then admits that he has been looking scary lately. When he grabbed Kizuki earlier, she had genuinely been frightened. Her tone takes on a stricter edge as she reminds him how important his hands are for his line of work. She then mentions that both he and Kizuki were idiots for fighting like that. Before she can say Kizuki's name again, Shugo presses a finger gently against her lips, silencing her. His gaze hardens as he tells her that the person standing in front of her right now is him. Then he pulls her into his arms, enveloping her in a firm embrace. His voice drops as he reminds her that the one who has spent the most time by her side has always been him. After a moment, awareness strikes him. He slowly releases her, sitting back as if he has crossed a line. He looks at her one last time before stating that he is going to take her home, and that she doesn't need to follow him back to their old town. As he drives, a familiar melody called Regret of My Heart plays in his mind, the piece Minami used to play. Kizuki is changing into his home clothes when Iru walks in. Iru notices a small patch on his upper back and falls silent for a moment, his thoughts drifting. When Kizuki finally realizes he is there, he awkwardly apologizes for living in such a small apartment. Airu brushes it off, simply grateful for the chance to reconnect after so long. They settle onto the couch, and after a brief stretch of silence, Airu asks why he and Shugo had decided to fight in front of Mizuho. When Kizuki does not answer, Airu admits that he had honestly planned to punch him the moment he saw him again, since Kizuki had left Mizuho heartbroken for 3 whole years. Yet strangely, that anger had melted away when they finally met face to face. Kizuki apologizes quietly, but Airu scoffs and tells him the person he truly needs to apologize to is Mizuho. After a long pause, Airu asks why he broke up with Mizuho. Kizuki exhales and admits that he ran away. Back in 2021, Kai, Shin's younger brother, had insisted that the group give up on Kizuki during a game, though the others stubbornly refused, saying they had to believe in him because Kizuki is a friend. All eyes had focused on Kizuki, who had been staring at the screen in disbelief as the words "game over" flashed before him. Kizuki apologized, but Kai had kicked him in the back, furious that they had almost won before Kizuki ruined their chance. Shin had snapped, reminding everyone that they had gathered to plan Kizuki's birthday, yet the guest of honor was sitting right there, making the surprise a complete disaster. Ignoring Shin's frustrations, Airu had told Shin to switch places with him, claiming he wanted to shower but promising to return and keep playing. However, Kai, still sulking, had decided to call it quits that evening. Shugo had noticed how much closer Mizuho and Kizuki had grown. It had begun to feel like they were a world of their own. Shin had noticed too and eventually told Mizuho to head home. She had insisted she had permission to stay, but Shin reminded her it was improper to remain so late in a boy's room if he was not her boyfriend. Realizing he was right, Mizuho agreed to leave, and Shin insisted that Kizuki walk her home. As they stepped out, Airu and Shugo quietly told Shin it was fine not to pretend because it was obvious the relationship was bothering him. Meanwhile, as Kizuki and Mizuho were walking home together, Kizuki had abruptly stopped and pressed a kiss to Mizuho's lips. He had explained that since it was his birthday the next day, he wanted to kiss her on his final day of being 16. They had continued on their way when Mizuho had asked what kind of birthday present he would like. Kizuki had admitted he wasn't sure about a physical gift, but he said he would like to hear her tell him what she liked about him. Caught off guard, Mizuho had confessed that she couldn't put it into words right away. Smiling playfully, Kizuki had gently turned her to face another direction and suggested they take the long route home so she would have time to think of her answer. As they walked, Kizuki had begun rambling about the things he liked about her. He had mentioned how much he admired her dedication to making her dream a reality. He had added that he loved how she supported him, and even how she sometimes showed up in his place with messy hair due to oversleeping. Mizuho had shot him an unimpressed glare, complaining that the last one sounded more like an insult. Kizuki had laughed good-naturedly and stopped by a fence to rest. That was when Mizuho had finally begun confessing her own thoughts. She had admitted it was difficult to clearly explain what she liked about him, but she admired the hope he carried within himself. Ever since they were children, he had been swimming toward his goals despite every obstacle. Watching him grow had made him her ray of hope. She had offered him a slightly uneasy smile, hoping her answer was enough to get her point across. Kizuki had felt his heart swell, and he had leaned down to kiss her again, pouring all his gratitude into it. When they had pulled away, Mizuho had pointed out that since it was already past midnight, that kiss counted as his first one at 17. On another day, Airu and Kizuki had spent time near the beach, looking through old photos on Airu's phone and reminiscing about their freshman year. Airu even had a bunch of videos of him that he never knew about. Airu had remarked that Kizuki had been training too hard, but Kizuki had declared he had no intention of slowing down, especially with competition starting again. He had said he wanted to show Mizuho how great he was in competition. On the day of the tournament, as Kizuki stepped onto the pool area, he spotted his friends and Mizuho cheering nearby. He had pointed at her and smiled, and the boys had recognized it as his declaration of victory. When it was his turn to swim, Kizuki felt like everything was within reach, especially with Mizuho cheering him on from the stands. That day, during the competition, he had managed to place first in his heat. Mizuho had cried tears of joy over his victory. In 2022, Mizuho and Kizuki were still together. They were out on a date when Mizuho reminded him of his promise to attend the fireworks festival with her and the others as usual. Kizuki smiled, noticing that she had been lonelier ever since he moved into the dorms to focus on swimming. She denied it, but he only laughed and called her cute. In 2025, the group attended the festival together without fail. Everyone was present as always, but Airu noticed that Mizuho had changed slightly and decided to ask Kizuki how she had been doing. Kizuki answered that Mizuho had decided to look for a job and had even attended an interview earlier. He also shared that he planned to go to graduate school for sports science. He had not been able to join the Japanese national team for swimming that year, but he wanted to see how far he could go by pushing himself even further. Airu found him admirable and lightly punched him in a good-hearted way. When Kizuki returned to his dorm, he overheard some coaches discussing how his generation was falling behind. They noted that they were referred to as the pandemic generation and had not been able to practice as much as others. That period apparently had been crucial for pushing their limits as athletes. Kizuki had gripped his arm in frustration that evening. At present, Airu recalls how brightly Kizuki's eyes used to shine during their youth. Kizuki then decides to share how it happened. In the same year, after hearing what had been said about him, Kizuki increased his training load and stopped listening to his physician despite repeated warnings. He felt like he knew his body best and could still push it further. During a meeting, he had remained in the pool and knew something was wrong with him. Mizuho had visited later to drop off food, but she had mentioned that she needed to meet Chika afterward. She had still wished him luck for practice, knowing that the selection meet was approaching and Kizuki was excited about it. She had been certain that Kizuki could make it. Kizuki, however, decided to keep the truth from her and resolved to work even harder for both of them. After she left, he had been plagued with uncertainty about his future as a swimmer. No matter how much he had pushed himself, he had not been improving. When his shoulder had begun feeling worse, he had gotten it checked and had learned that he needed surgery. The news had devastated him because it meant he would miss the selection meet. His physician had advised him to take a hiatus from swimming until he recovered. Still, Kizuki had sensed there was more being left unsaid, so he had demanded a timeline for when he could return to swimming and even asked if it was possible for him to regain his former form. The physician had admitted there was no telling how long the healing process would take, nor whether he would ever return as a competitive swimmer. Even so, he had insisted that Kizuki proceed with the surgery, otherwise his condition would never improve. He then left Kizuki alone to process everything. After the surgery, Kizuki began rehabilitation immediately. On one particular day, Mizuho had visited to watch over him while he had struggled through a routine. She had urged him to take his recovery slowly, fully aware he had been pushing himself too hard. Eventually, it was announced that he would withdraw from competing that year. As he had listened to the announcement, he had felt lost and unbearably weak. He had remembered how Mizuho once called him her ray of hope and described how brightly he used to shine. Now that he could no longer swim, he had begun to fear she would no longer see him that way. The thought of disappointing and losing Mizuho had hurt more than losing his ability to swim competitively. A few days later, he had told her his decision to quit the swim team. Mizuho had been devastated, trying to convince him he could still recover since he had been working so hard in rehab. But Kizuki had remained firm. He had declared that everything he had done until then had been a waste of time. When Mizuho had tried to argue, he had coldly mentioned that she had also given up on her dream and become an office worker instead of pursuing life as a manga artist. They both remembered how Kizuki had once told Mizuho not to give up after one of her manga had been rejected in high school. They also remembered the day years later when Mizuho had broken the news that she had quit manga for good and had decided to look for a job instead. Kizuki had been worried about her decision, but she had insisted she had made peace with it, and that he could continue chasing his dream without being tied to hers. So when he shared his own desire to quit the swim team, he felt that Mizuho should respect his decision as well. He had told her he was no longer a child and that he was tired of chasing an impossible dream. Mizuho had agreed that they were no longer children, yet she had struggled to find the right words to respond. He had taken the bill and had begun walking out of the restaurant. Mizuho had stood and had asked what would happen to them after that conversation. He had not been able to answer her. Instead, he had continued walking forward. That day, he had walked out of Mizuho's life. At present, he shares with Airu that he ran away and had cut off contact with everyone. He had found a job and had built himself up from there. Kizuki finds himself pouring all his regrets up to Airu. He feels guilt rising within him because he never truly forgot about swimming or Mizuho, no matter how hard he tried to move on. He begins to berate himself for being the youngest and growing slower than the rest of them. Airu places a comforting hand on his shoulder and tells Kizuki he no longer needs to continue if it is too painful to remember. As night slowly turns into morning, Airu shows him an old keychain Mizuho had given Kizuki. He explains that he picked it up at the spot where Kizuki and Shugo had been fighting and that it now looks worn and dirty. He tells Kizuki that keeping the keychain all this time speaks volumes about his feelings for Mizuho and that he knows Kizuki had never stopped loving her. He tells Kizuki that there is nothing wrong with being the youngest in their group. To Airu, Kizuki was always the most willful, the most honest, and the most eager among them. He had known Kizuki cared for Mizuho the most because he had always kept a close eye on him. Airu says he always loved the Kizuki who moved forward and loved Mizuho without hesitation. He hands him the keychain and tells him that if he truly loves her, he should stand up one more time. Kizuki's hand clutches tightly around the keychain. That morning, Kizuki goes out to jog, his mind recalling Airu's words. In 2021, Mizuho had been working as a waitress at Shugo's restaurant. The restaurant had specialized in Italian cuisine, so they would often slip bits of Italian into their conversations. Shugo had noticed that Mizuho had forgotten to ask a guest how they wanted their iced tea prepared. She had quickly started to head back to the table, but Shugo had stopped her to fix her apron first. Goro, Shugo's father, had thanked her for helping during their peep months and had even invited her to continue working on slower days. He had promised staff meals and had reminded her to eat the one he prepared for her and Shugo before going home. Mizuho had bragged at that since she loved his margarita pizza, but Shugo had sharply reminded her to work for it. Shugo's parents had smiled at their interaction that day. After the restaurant closed, Shugo had walked Mizuho home. In the distance, they had been able to see fireworks from a neighboring town. As they walked, Shugo asked about the number of shifts she had been picking up. Mizuho had revealed that she wanted to save as much money as possible because Kizuki would be traveling for competitions. She had wanted to go with him to cheer him on. She had known that the upcoming competition was important since it would be his last chance to enter the high school tournament. Shugo had masked his disappointment by teasing that Kizuki's expression would be something to see if he failed the qualifiers. Mizuho had understood he meant no harm and confidently expressed her belief in Kizuki's abilities. Meanwhile, along another part of the coast, Toya had brought Iru to watch the fireworks from afar. Iru had been happy to share the moment and had asked how Toya found the spot. He had also asked why Toya suddenly invited him out, suspecting it was because he had told Toya that Kizuki rejected him. Toya had remained silent, so Iru had confessed that although Kizuki turned him down, he had insisted they remain friends. Iru had spoken fondly of Kizuki and mentioned that he was finally happy with who he was. He had thanked Toya for helping him find himself. After that, he was startled when Toya suddenly pulled him into a kiss. When Toya had pulled away, he had apologized for making a move on Iru, aware that he had previously promised he wouldn't. Still, he had admitted he could no longer stop himself when it came to Iru. He had confessed that he loved him and wanted him to forget about Kizuki. Iru had told him he did not think it would ever be possible for him to forget Kizuki. Toya had decided he was willing to accept that and had drawn Iru in for another kiss. A few days later at school, Shin and Mizuho visited Kizuki in his classroom and told him to wait. Not long after, Shugo and Iru had entered and Shugo handed Kizuki a paper bag the group had prepared for him. Kizuki's smile had widened in excitement, but Shugo and Iru had reminded him not to open it just yet. Shin then warned him that he had been practicing too hard and said he was worried about his health. Kizuki had reassured him that his training hours were getting shorter and that a swimming magazine would be interviewing him soon. He had explained that he was pushing himself because he truly wanted to compete in his final high school tournament. Soon, Kizuki had left for practice and the group had felt a little down knowing they could not all go cheer for him together. Shugo had suggested they grab dinner before heading home and Mizuho and Shin had agreed. Iru declined, saying he had somewhere important to be. That evening, Iru ended up at Toya's apartment. He prepared a simple dinner and felt happy watching Toya eat the food he made. They had been celebrating Toya's birthday, just the two of them. Iru had chatted excitedly about school and Kizuki's growing media attention. When he handed Toya a slice of cake, Toya had asked him to spend the weekend together. Iru had agreed, but he suddenly received a call. From Toya's side, it had become clear that Kizuki was on the other end. Iru had eagerly agreed to spend the weekend with him as well. After the call ended, Iru realized he had double-booked himself and turned to apologize. Toya had expressed his disappointment, pointing out that Iru seemed to talk about nothing but Kizuki. Though Iru had apologized, Toya had stepped out of the apartment. Iru had regretted bringing up Kizuki again, and he had felt terrible for hurting Toya that night. At present, Iru looks fondly at a photo Toya took for a magazine. He reflects on how much of a mess he used to be. Shugo calls his attention back to the table just as Mizuho finishes preparing their drinks. Iru initiates the toast, but he cannot hide his disappointment that only the three of them are present. Shugo explains that Shin is still at work and he has no idea what Kizuki is doing. Iru grimaces, knowing Shugo is still bitter about Kizuki's return. He had hoped they could all gather like old times, especially since he is returning to England next week. Iru decides to share his own news that he and his boyfriend are getting married, though he does not mention his name. He holds up his engagement ring and explains that since they are both Japanese, their marriage cannot legally be recognized. Still, they plan to live together and hope that others will acknowledge them as a married couple in their own way. Mizuho responds with nothing but happiness and wholehearted support. She excitedly asks what kind of boyfriend Iru has. Iru laughs and says he is serious and someone who practically knows all of them already because of Iru's endless childhood stories. He admits that he hopes one day they will be able to get married in Japan like everyone else. By sunset, Shugo walks Mizuho home. As they stroll, they joke about how much they drank during their small reunion. Shugo remarks that a clear sign they have become adults is that one of them is already getting married. As they walk, his thoughts drift back to when they were younger, to the days when Mizuho worked part-time at his family's restaurant. She was eating the pizza Goro had prepared for the staff meal and had praised him endlessly. Goro then walked over to Shugo, who was cleaning the dishes, and teased him, saying he needed to learn to make pizza as great as his someday. Shugo did not see the point, but Goro merely chuckled, then whispered to Shugo that he could win Mizuho over with excellent pizza, and maybe she would even marry into their family. Goro was aware of Shugo's crush on Mizuho and fully supported him, encouraging him to act on his feelings instead of keeping them hidden. At present, he wonders if he should take Goro's advice after all. He whispers her name, and when she turns her attention to him, he hesitates. Instead of confessing, he dismisses the thought and chooses to continue their familiar walk, just like they always have. In the past, Kizuki had managed to make it past the qualifiers, and the school had celebrated that as a win. However, upon his return, he shared that he had not won the overall high school competition. Still, many fans went to see him as he was interviewed by a local TV station. His friends watched him from a distance, and Iru even shared a photo of himself and Kizuki for views. They discussed how Kizuki's future was practically set at the moment. They then began talking about their own dreams. Shugo admitted that he did not have a particular goal in life and just wanted to live a simple life as a salary man. He openly told Iru that he envied him for being popular, though Iru claimed that popularity could be fleeting. Iru then asked Chika about her goal, and she shared that she was planning to go to pharmaceutical school to earn a license, which shocked some of them. Suddenly, they heard the interviewer asking some girls nearby if Kizuki had a girlfriend. Thinking quickly, Shin pulled Mizuho away so they could leave without getting interviewed. When they left the school gates, they saw Togo waiting for them. Apparently, he was there because he needed to show Shugo something. Shugo grumbled, thinking Goro was sending them on an errand, but he got in the car anyway. During the trip, he continued to complain, but Togo suddenly turned serious and told him to remain calm because he needed to tell Shugo something important. After a brief pause, he finally told Shugo that Goro had passed away. During the funeral services, Shugo's friends and their parents were present. Despite people crying in front of him, Shugo remained polite, not shedding a tear and thanking everyone for their time. As Mizuho and the others walked home, they were bothered that Shugo did not look like he was grieving. Iru asked Mizuho if they had been of any help to her when her mother, Kaho, had died. Mizuho confirmed that they had because they had stayed by her side, so she was now alone. Once she returned home, she looked at an old family photo and asked Kaho how she could help Shugo. The next day, Shugo and Togo were cleaning up the restaurant. Shugo learned that Naoko, their mother, wanted to keep the place running. He then told Togo that his last words to Goro had been that he did not want any breakfast as he headed to school. Goro had even made him his favorite type of eggs that day. Togo placed a comforting hand on Shugo's head, but Shugo suddenly announced that he had decided to go to culinary school so he could run the restaurant. Togo was against it, insisting that university was the better choice. He moved past Shugo and revealed that he would be the one taking over and that he had already submitted his resignation. Togo reasoned that, as the eldest brother, it was his duty to protect the restaurant and Naoko. He told Shugo he would hire a chef for now and assured him that someday Shugo would find something he was truly passionate about. By sunset, Shugo went near the sea to watch the waves when Mizuho approached him. He shared that he had just finished cleaning the restaurant. He told her about what Togo had said and wondered why Togo was suddenly acting so mature now that Goro was no longer with them. Mizuho told Shugo that Togo had probably already known that Shugo would offer to take over the restaurant because he cared about them. She believed that Togo wanted Shugo to think for himself for once, which was why he had decided to take over. Shugo was briefly taken aback by Mizuho's sudden formal tone, but then he asked her if she believed in heaven. In response, Mizuho shouted at the sky, telling Kaho to take care of Goro, and that in return, Goro should make Kaho his pizzas. Shugo laughed at the gesture, and Mizuho gave him a seashell that she had made into an amulet by drawing 3 stars on it. She told him it was so he could have more blessings and because Shugo was the most important 3-star level chef to her. Feeling himself break, he finally slumped onto her shoulder, allowing himself that small moment of vulnerability. Mizuho then told him that there was a saying that the departed continue to live in the hearts of those they left behind. She shared her own experience and how she could hear Kaho's voice whenever she drew. She then asked Shugo if he could hear Goro's voice. Suddenly, memories of Goro flooded his mind and more tears escaped his eyes as he admitted that he could. At present, Shugo is back at the restaurant when Kizuki unexpectedly arrives. Still not over their fight, he asks Kizuki to leave. However, Kizuki wants to apologize properly. But before he can get the words out, Shugo apologizes first and even gives him his favorite panini as a peace offering. Kizuki eats the meal and admits it is delicious after finishing it. He then helps Shugo with the dishes. Shugo chides him to do his best since Kizuki will be returning to swimming. Kizuki agrees and promises to come crying to him if it does not work out, just like when they were kids. Shugo splashes some water on him and they both laugh. Somehow, to rekindle their friendship, Shugo tells him that he has already made up his mind that he will always protect Kizuki and Mizuho. However, he now wants to tell Mizuho how he feels, so he issues a challenge to Kizuki, and Kizuki agrees to settle it between them. One evening, as Kizuki jogs, he remembers how he ended things with Mizuho. The memory of how hurt she looked fills him with regret as he pushes forward. That same evening, while checking a manga she needs to edit, Mizuho receives a call from Tsuyoshi, her father. She is surprised that he is calling her at such a late hour, but Tsuyoshi is only worried because he thinks she is not taking care of herself. He coughs a lot during the conversation, which worries Mizuho. He admits it has been happening more frequently and thinks it is a sign that he is aging. Tsuyoshi then tells Mizuho that he recently heard that Kizuki quit his job. Mizuho is shocked and lowers the phone. At that moment, she receives an email informing her that her request to interview a swimming team has been accepted. On the day of the interview, she brings Megu, the mangaka of an upcoming romance manga. The field day was originally arranged for Megu as a way to research how swimming teams work. When they enter the swimming club halls, Mizuho feels a wave of nostalgia hit her. Megu notices and asks about it, so Mizuho shares that a child and friend learned how to swim there. They reach the observation deck leading to the pool, giving them a view of the pool. Megu and Mizuho look toward the pool and spot Kizuki talking to a coach. The man guiding them tells them that Kizuki will be the interviewee for Megu's work. Mizuho's eyes tremble as she recognizes Kizuki and realizes there is no way out but to speak with him today. She suddenly gets flashbacks of when they were younger, when Kizuki was just learning to swim, when she jumped into the pool after him, those tender moments when he confessed his love, their first kiss, what high school felt like, how she eventually responded to his feelings, and how right it felt to be his girlfriend. Mizuho watches him do his laps and shuts her eyes to prepare herself to face him. When Kizuki finishes his lap, he looks over at the viewing deck and recognizes Mizuho. Megu notices the gaze and turns to Mizuho, who looks like she's having an inner battle. Megu realizes that they know each other. During the interview, Megu manages to get a lot of information and thanks Kizuki for his time. Kizuki remains kind and polite and admits that his information might not be fully updated since he only recently returned to swimming. He shares that he quit because of a horrible shoulder injury. He lost his will to do anything and even push away the people he considered precious to him. Mizuho's fists clench around her bag as Kizuki tells Megu that he does not want to run away anymore. That is why he is returning to swimming and has even quit his job. Mizuho listens attentively, shocked that Kizuki is serious about coming back. Megu asks if he has any hesitations. Kizuki acknowledges that it was a risky decision. His gaze lands on Mizuho as he says he wants to prove himself to someone. Megu notices his gaze and glances toward Mizuho while his instructor laughs in a good-natured way, saying that Kizuki's shoulder is still healing. Kizuki whines back that he will definitely fix it. Megu then continues recording as she watches him do his drills. Mizuho watches from afar, admitting to herself that Kizuki is truly dazzling when he swims. By sunset, Mizuho and Megu leave the swim club. Megu thanks her, explaining that she wants to use today's interview to build a rival for the protagonist in her manga. She then fixes Mizuho with a curious stare and asks if the childhood friend Mizuho mentioned earlier was actually Kizuki. Mizuho gasps in surprise that Megu managed to guess correctly. Megu even adds that Mizuho seemed unaware of his comeback and guesses that Kizuki was probably her high school boyfriend. Before Mizuho can answer, Kizuki calls out her name and runs toward her. He grabs her wrist and confesses that he misses her. Suddenly, Megu exclaims that she's bursting with creative energy, making Kizuki and Mizuho pull away in embarrassment. Megu announces that she will take her leave so she can start working on her storyboards. Once she is out of earshot, Kizuki immediately apologizes for disappearing from Mizuho's life for 3 years. But Mizuho only says that she is surprised he returned to swimming. She admits that she is mostly mad at herself for never trying to understand him when he told her he wanted to quit. She realizes that her words probably pushed Kizuki into a corner. However, Kizuki denies it. To him, her words were encouragement, and they were the exact reason he decided to return to swimming. He declares that he wants to be a swimmer again. Kizuki admits he is not sure if he will ever return to his peak, but he wants to reclaim everything he has lost. He mentions that one of his goals is to make her fall for him again. A few days later, Megu submits her new storyboards. Mizuho stares at them in defeat because they remind her of her own high school romance. The work is good, but it frustrates her because it reminds her of her past, so she groans out loud. Sakura notices her turmoil but does not really comfort her. Instead, Sakura tells her to snap out of her slump quickly so she can help her with something. Mizuho leans over Sakura's desk to see what she is editing. She notices 2 male characters on the panel. Sakura explains that the female lead has been confessed to by 2 characters, and she does not know how to progress the story. Mizuho then remembers Shin's recent confession and the way he held her as if she truly mattered. Then she remembers Kizuki's confession from just a few days ago and how determined his gaze looked. She begins thinking deeply and realizes she needs to sort out her feelings before making any decision. Sakura notices that Mizuho looks troubled. Mizuho groans and asks Sakura what she would do if she were the female lead who had to choose between 2 guys. Before Sakura can answer, one of their colleagues calls for Mizuho, saying she has a visitor with the last name Kashiwagi waiting at the front desk. Both go around Mizuho excitedly because they heard the visitor is very handsome. Mizuho heads to the front desk and sees Kai, who is currently a high school student. Kai smiles the moment he sees her and asks if she is ready to quit her job and just marry him. Mizuho's colleagues watch from the side, already charmed by Kai's looks, and feel jealous because Mizuho has such a handsome boy. What they do not know is that ever since Kai was a child, he has always asked Mizuho to marry him. Mizuho slaps him on the back, telling him that no matter how much he grows, he is still the kid she remembers playing with. She is surprised to see him in her building, so Kai explains that he is in town to look at nearby universities he plans to apply to. He then kneels down, pulls out a small bag, and hands it to her, asking her to give the food to Shin, who is currently down with a cold. He says he would have visited Shin himself, but he has to avoid getting sick because he might miss his exams. As he moves to leave, Mizuho tells him that she cannot visit Shin because it will put her in an awkward situation. Kai smiles kindly at her and asks if something happened between them recently. When Mizuho refuses to answer, Kai has a feeling it is about Shin's confession. He casually tells her that she can just choose him instead of Shin if she wants to solve all of her problems. When Kai leaves, Mizuho feels like she has no choice but to deliver the medicine. That evening, the clouds are dark with the threat of rain soon. Shin struggles to get any restful sleep because of his fever. In his dream, he remembers running to Mizuho's house as a child. He had arrived just as Mizuho was about to run out. Noticing Shin, instead of waiting for him to speak, she had quickly asked him to tell everyone that Kizuki was sick so she could go ahead and check on him. She ran toward Kizuki's house without waiting for a response. Shin could only stare at her running away from him. He wonders what he is to her. Another memory surfaces. One time after high school, Mizuho had come to his house and rang the doorbell non-stop. When he opened the door annoyed, he was shocked to see her in tears. She immediately hugged him, and he assumed she was upset because she had fought with Kizuki. Instead, Mizuho was crying tears of joy because she had heard that he passed the entrance exam for his dream school. She congratulated him excitedly, which surprised him. He hugged her tightly and thanked her. Soon, their other friends peeked out from their hiding places and joined the hug, congratulating him with tears of their own. But for Shin, the person who mattered most was Mizuho standing in the center of it all. They stayed at his house that night to celebrate everyone's success. Later, Shin woke up in the darkness of his room, surrounded by his friends who had fallen asleep. He turned and saw Kizuki cuddling against Mizuho in his sleep. Shin turned away, realizing that the day Mizuho would need him might never come. Another memory followed. During one of Kizuki's competitions, Shin felt his chest tighten as he watched Mizuho happily chatting with Kizuki nearby. He was jealous of how happy they were. When he entered university, he spent many evenings with different girls, hoping he could erase the ache in his heart from loving someone he could never have. Eventually, he convinced himself that he no longer needed to try so hard because Mizuho was already happy without him. More recently, he had been shocked when Mizuho told him that Kizuki had returned to their town. The news stirred a deep fear inside him that he is losing her to Kizuki again. Shin suddenly wakes up, heaving his hands stretched toward the ceiling as if chasing someone who has already slipped away. As he calms his breathing, he is startled to see Mizuho sitting near his coffee table. Mizuho notices that he is awake and tells him that his fever is still bad. Still shaken from his dream, Shin says his fever should break soon since he has already taken medicine. Mizuho smiles kindly and mentions that Kai asked her to deliver some food for him, which she has already placed in his refrigerator. Thinking that he will be fine, she makes a move to leave, but Shin suddenly grabs her wrist and begs her to stay. Overcome with the fear of losing her again, he confesses how jealous he has always been of Kizuki for having her by his side whenever he was sick. He pulls her into an embrace and asks if she is still in contact with Kizuki. Mizuho hesitates for a moment before quietly admitting that she is. Shin pulls back slightly so he can look at her. He tells her that he will never forgive Kizuki for hurting her. Suddenly, he pulls her down onto the bed and pins her there. He asks her to stay with him, leaning closer as he tries to kiss her. Mizuho is too shocked to react, but before Shin can follow through, his strength gives out and he collapses on top of her because of his fever. Carefully, Mizuho slips out from beneath him. She checks his temperature and realizes he is still burning up. A few moments later, she leaves his apartment. Just outside, she unexpectedly runs into Kuroda, who is approaching Shin's door. When Kuroda nears her, she bows respectfully and explains that she only came to drop off food for Shin that his mother, Miki, had prepared. When Kuroda simply stares at her, Mizuho decides it is best to leave. She walks past Kuroda, but Kuroda suddenly asks what Shin is to her. Mizuho pauses, takes a breath, and answers that Shin is her childhood friend. Kuroda looks offended and tells Mizuho that she's being unfair because Shin clearly looks at her differently. Right now, Kuroda admits that she cannot face Shin because of everything that has been left unsaid between them. Mizuho is about to say something, but Kuroda abruptly says that she was just jealous. Afterward, Kurota hangs something on Shin's doorknob before walking past Mizugo. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to see what happens next.